Hi there, this is my BMW R1200 GS. It's a 2009 model. I've had it for a number of years and use it for touring around the country here in New Zealand, but also use it a significant amount off-road. And I thought I'd do a quick review of the Anakee Wilds made by Michelin that I've just taken off, and I've got another trip coming up. These ones are getting down a bit, so it's time to try a new set. I thought I'd give you a bit of a rundown on my experience of them. They're a tyre that I put on after I'd had my TKC 70s on there for a period of time, and also messing around with the TKC 80s. I figured I'd give these ones a bit of a lash, both on my experience of what they're like on the open road, what they're like off-road, and also how they've worn and the noise that they make for general touring. So this one here is my rear tyre, and as you can see, after 2,500 kilometres, it has about half of its wear. There's little nubs just on the back here that you can see, and the leading edge of the tyre has got down a fair bit, which means that it's still okay in gravel, but as soon as you get into mud or anything a little deeper, it's just coming towards the end of its use by period. They said that they wear about 40% more, maybe slightly more than a TKC 70 or TKC 80, sorry. My experience is that seems to be the case. They do wear very well, and they handle superbly off-road. There's no doubt about it. You can see by the valleys in the midst of the knobs here, and the size of the knobs themselves, which are relatively small compared to the TKC 80s, means that they do really dig in and give you significant traction off-road. Excellent on gravel, loose pack gravel, really good in off-camber clay and also in mud. They do handle exceptionally well in that regard, and you can see that that's probably going to be the case just by virtue of the tread pattern and the way the tyre is put together. Being a radial means that it works really well on-road, although I have to say, given the speed of these bikes by and large and the touring speeds at 70 to 80 miles an hour, even if you're using a bias ply tyre versus a radial, I've never really noticed a huge amount of difference, but some people may find an alternative. That's not exactly what their experience has been, but I've never really noticed the difference between a radial and a bias ply. The big thing for me in this tyre is that on-road it handles superbly well. And the grip of these is just amazing. I'm a fairly aggressive rider, particularly on-road. It doesn't mean I drive like a lunatic, but I do love twisties, and these things have never ever let me down, even in the tightest turns. New Zealand's roads are by and large chip seal, with a fair bit of tar seal as well. They're not always in good condition, and there's often bits and pieces lying around on the road from various slips that occur in our hilly country. And I've never had one of these let go, especially at the rear. The only time it ever did go on me was out of a long sweeping corner, and I just got onto the gas too hard. But I have to say, when it did let go in a very progressive fashion, and as soon as I backed off the gas just a bit, the tyre picked its grip up again and off it went, and there was no real worries. The front tyre I put on first, funnily enough. I had some space left on my TKC 70, and I had this one on as a trial. The front actually handles remarkably well. Never given me any trouble on the road, and certainly off-road it increases your confidence, especially when running a TKC 70 on the back, significantly. This tyre's done about 5,500 kilometres now, and as you can see, it's really not worn in any significant way. There's no unusual tread wear as you get on some of the other tyres, and off-road it improved my riding ability no end, and on-road it never gave me any cause for concern at all, even in the tightest of corners. Because of the nature of the blocks here, you can see that they've got a wall that bridges the two blocks every second row, and that means that the tyre is incredibly stable when you've got it cranked over in the corners, and also means that it hangs very well on off-camber material when you're riding in slippery conditions off the road itself. There's been a lot of mention about noise on these tyres. When I had this tyre running on the front with the TKC 70 on the rear, I really didn't notice a significant increase in sound. It certainly wasn't obtrusive. Yes, it made a little bit more rumbling noise, and when you got up to sort of 50 miles per hour and thereabouts, you could hear it, but it certainly wasn't obtrusive, and it was never annoying. It wasn't until I put the rear tyre on that the harmonics between the two went through the roof. These things really do howl something terrible, and it took me a wee while to get used to it in the first 6 months of running them, and finally once you got up to speed, the noise of the wind usually overcame them. But what I did find is that by the time the rear tyre had got to about half worn, the noise really elevated in terms of frequency and actually moved into almost a scream. And quite frankly, it was really irritating, even with earplugs. They just simply did not get rid of the sound. And that was determined a little bit by the kind of road that you were actually on. If you're on chip seal, it wasn't so bad, but sometimes when you got on smooth road and if it was a bit damp, the screaming was really quite appalling. So that's one of the reasons that for me, I've decided not to use them again in the meantime, principally because in New Zealand I have to travel some distance on the road to get to the places where I wish to do a day of off-road riding, and it makes the trip quite uncomfortable. It also means that travelling around New Zealand just for touring becomes a very loud experience. So my observation is that when you first get them, the sound is actually not too bad, but as the tyre wears, and obviously as the tyre wears, these knobs are going to get harder and less flexible. It means that the volume or the frequency of the sound actually gets very high and becomes something of a scream. If you would want a an Anakee Wild on the front with something else on the rear, I found that to be an excellent combination. Some have said that the front is actually really loud. I've not found that to be the case. I found that the tyres get very loud when they run in tandem with each other. So if you're prepared to put up with the noise, I think that they are actually the best off-road, on-road combination in terms of handling. The downside of them is that they are extremely loud, and if you're riding for a bit of fun or enjoyment for a day and you're not off-road, these are really irritating tyres. And I think probably in fairness that just simply the tread pattern of the tyre will give you an idea that it's going to be a loud tyre, and it is much louder than the TKC 80, I think, especially as the tyre wears, but at the same time I think it handles better off-road and also handles better on-road too. So it is a good all-round tyre. Michelin have done a good job with this particular tyre set, and I'd say it's probably at the top of the food chain if you are seriously into using these big, huge, heavy bikes off-road, which I am. I really enjoy. I think it's a great challenge tearing around the back blocks and these things, and a huge amount of fun. So good tyres, not suitable for what I really want, so I've moved to a different tyre this time around, and am giving for the very first time a new tyre that's on the market called the Moto Z or Motoz Tractionator. I've only just put these ones on. As you can see, they're a very different tread pattern, huge blocks, good side blocks, and I have already taken them for a quick whirl for about 30 kilometres after putting them on, and they are significantly quieter than the Anakee Wilds. I have no idea how they handle yet. They're still scrubbing in, and what they're going to be like off-road I don't know. The front tyre, likewise you can see it's quite a different block pattern. Where it will make a difference I think in terms of volume is if you notice in here you've got the block pattern here, but you don't have the big valleys going right across because there is a block spaced in here, which means that it takes the sound and probably smooths it out. You'll also notice that the block in the middle here is a different shape to the one on the Wild, and it's a consistent block pattern all the way through, whereas the Wild goes single and then double, which gives you good traction, but it also does increase the volume of the tyre. So it'll be interesting to see how these go. They're designed in Australia for Australian conditions, made in Thailand from what I understand. They're pretty easy to get on the rim, but they're also very solid construction. They've got something like 4 plies in them, which means that they've got a very stiff sidewall, much like the Wilds, and I suspect they're probably going to be quite a reasonable tyre. So once I've done a couple of thousand Ks on these, or perhaps sooner, I'll whip a review out of my experience of the Moto Z Tractionators. These bikes are heavy, They require good tyres to function properly, especially on the road. Hurling 240 odd kilos with all the gear on them that I've got, especially set up for off-road, means that they do require reasonable rubber. And the Anakee Wilds, I'd say, are very good tyres, just too loud for me, and I've got a little bit worn for this next trip, so we'll see how the Moto Z actually works. Anyway, if you've got any questions, post them at the bottom and I'll be happy to respond as I can. Thanks for watching.